morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to our Sunday morning class. We are continuing our study of the book of Mark. So if you have a Bible with you or sit next to somebody who does, we're going to be in chapter 8. I will not be here next Sunday. Gary has agreed to teach the class for me. I'm not sure what he's going to do, if he's going to stay in Mark or if he's going to jump over and cover Revelation in 1 week. It's not quite sure what he got planned. And I will be flying out Friday morning to go to Dallas to bring Carrie back to Indiana. And we'll be worshiping Sunday at Grapevine, where many of you know I spent almost 14 years. So it's going to be fun to kind of have a reunion while we're there. So if you would join me, let's ask God's blessings upon our study time. Righteous Father, Holy One, magnificent Creator, God of peace and mercy, justice and grace. Thank you for the opportunity to be in your presence this morning. Thank you for your people who have gathered not just in this room or in this building, but who will be gathering together or because of time zones have already been in your presence, studying your word and worshiping you with all their heart, mind, body, and soul. Pray, Father, this morning for your guidance. You've promised to provide for us wisdom if we will but ask it. So, Father, this morning, that is my prayer, that you will give me heaven's wisdom to be able to share the things that Mark has recorded for us. Father, as we look at the events that are on the pages of our Bible, I pray, Father, that the one desire of our heart would be to ask ourselves, how does this apply to me? What am I supposed to learn about Jesus? Father, thank you for the spirit in which Mark writes as he presents for us and to his original audience a sovereign who is true in every sense of that word and yet is so unlike any definition that we have of someone who's sovereign, because he is a suffering servant. Father, again, thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for those who are present this morning. May our time together, Father, be one that honors you and one that encourages and uplifts us. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen. We briefly looked at the latter part of chapter 8 last time together. And Mark records for us a very simple or watered down, if you may, event in the ministry of Jesus that Matthew gives us a whole lot more detail. And Jesus and his disciples went on to the villages around Caesarea Philippi. On the way, he asked him, "Who do people say that I am?" What's the word on the street? What are you hearing these people now talk about my ministry? Excuse me. Jesus has been teaching, he's been healing, he has been traveling, and he goes, "So what's the word?" And they replied, and we know from Matthew's account that Peter is the one who speaks on behalf of the group. And they replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, still others one of the prophets." "But what about you?" he asked. "Who do you say that I am?" And I'm going to stop there for just a second. I do find it interesting that Jesus didn't say, "Who do you think I am?" Not what's going on in me. What's your opinion of me? He says, who do you say that I am? Who do you tell others about? What is it about me that you tell others? He says that you are the Christ. And Jesus warned them not to tell anyone about him. And Matthew gives us the further details. And Jesus talking about him building his kingdom and the gates of hell not prevailing against it. Why, at this particular juncture, does Jesus want their opinion? Why does he ask? Who do people say that I am? Who do you say that I am? Why is Jesus presenting that question to them? Yeah,
Are they at least beginning to get it?
Are they at least beginning to get it? Because what's interesting is what takes place next. And I think Mark gives us this in this particular order because of the connection between these two thoughts. Well, some say that you're John the Baptist. Now, by this point, John the Baptist has already been killed. Does somebody have a hand up? Somebody's pointing? Oh, okay. They're both over here doing this, and I'm going, what did I miss? John the Baptist is dead. We know Elijah has been dead a long time. And he said, well, some people say that maybe you're the reincarnation or the resurrected of these individuals. Who do you tell people that I am? You are the Christ. Verse 31, he then began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things, be rejected by the elders, chief priests, and the teachers of the law, that he must be killed, and after 3 days rise again. He spoke plainly about this. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. Jesus is now, yes, Jim?
You skipped over that one where he said, he sternly told him not to tell anybody about him. He's done that many times with other people. Why does he do that?
I think part of it, Jim's question was, we didn't hear, why is Jesus telling the disciples here and on multiple occasions, people that he's healed, etc., don't go tell anybody. I think part of it is the fact that Jesus knew that his death had to be at a very specific time with the Passover. And I think the reason why he's telling you, he does not want to have his hand forced, if you will. And I realize it's kind of difficult to say, who can force God's hand? But boy, have we not done that on multiple occasions. I think that's part of it, is that he wants to make sure that his time frame is met per, as Paul says in Galatians, at just the right time Christ came into this world. I think that may be part of it. I'm open to suggestions. Others who are much more learned than I am, Gary, and then...
Sometimes when someone becomes so popular, they want to use that person over and over and over.
Okay.
And they don't have time to do what their purpose is.
Maybe it's because the additional revelation or announcement may have made it impossible for him to do. And we see that the crowds have hindered him from doing some of the things that he wanted to do, Gary.
They didn't have the full story yet.
They didn't have the full story yet, and that's a very good point as well. Thank you, Jim.
Well, you implied, and I'm not saying this not right, but when he said, who do you say that I am? I don't think he was telling them then, I want you to open up your mouth and tell people who I am, when he said the very next statement.
Right.
So I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point. 31, he is now telling them exactly what is going to happen with this sovereign. 4 things. He's going to suffer. He's going to be rejected by the political leader, or the religious leaders of his day. They're going to kill him, but he's going to rise again. I'm going to suffer. I'm going to do so at the hands of the religious people of our day. They're going to kill me, but I'm not going to stay dead. And an interesting Mark says, based upon Peter, he spoke plainly about this. There was no confusion. Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But when Jesus turned and looked at the disciples, he rebuked Peter. "Get behind me, Satan," he said. "You do not have in mind the things of God, but the things of men." It's interesting. Yes, sir.
I just find it interesting that in other accounts, Jesus praised Peter for his answer before, and then immediately after, get behind me, Satan.
Yeah. He praises Peter for his acknowledgement that he is the Christ, the Son of the living God. And now he's rebuking Peter because Peter is rebuking him. Why? Why is Peter pulling him aside and go, "You got this all wrong"? Yes, sir?
I think he still doesn't understand what Messiah means, what it all encompasses.
That the Messiah is going to be rejected, suffer, killed, and raised does not fit the script.
They're still looking for deliverance from the Romans.
They're still looking for, and how's that going to work?
And it's probably just, Peter loves him. He's his buddy, his friend, his buddy. He doesn't want to even think about it.
Yeah. And there's some of that too, that affection of going, somebody told me that my buddy Greg telling me, that's garbage, stop talking like that. And Jesus, it's interesting how Mark records this. He's looking at the disciples, but he's rebuking Peter. It doesn't say he looks at Peter and rebukes him. He is rebuking Peter by looking at the disciples. And so if I'm looking at my friend Rick and I say, "Now, Terry, I want you to understand this," what's the first thing Rick is going to do? He's going to look at Terry. And so what Jesus is doing is not just telling Peter, "Get behind me, Satan." He's looking at the disciples to say, "You see what he's saying?"
From Peter's standpoint, you're following this guy, you've devoted your life to this guy, and all of a sudden he says, "They're going to kill me, don't worry, I'm going to raise myself from the dead." He's probably think that's not going to sell well.
No.
You're going to think you're nuts, and our whole thing's going to go down the drain.
Yep. Has anybody ever seen the Passion, the plays? The Passions of Christ, where they I know they do one in Round Rock, Texas, and they have I love the one that they did in Glen Rose, Texas. Is Satan is standing behind the disciples, and as he looks at the disciples, he's rebuking Peter, but he's talking to Satan, who's stirring this all up anyway. And so he rebukes Peter and he says, "You get behind me, Satan." I like that interpretation of it. But Jesus is pretty specific. "You don't understand the purpose of my ministry." Verse 34, "Then he called the crowd to him along with his disciples and said, 'If anyone would come after me, he must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. Whoever wants to save his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life for me and the gospel will save it. What good is it for a man to gain the whole world and yet forfeit his soul? Or what can a man give in exchange for his soul? If anyone is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will be ashamed of him when he comes in his Father's glory with the holy angels.'" What's the word on the street? You're the Christ. Let me explain to you what it means to be the Christ, the Son of the living God. I'm going to suffer. I'm going to be rejected. I'm going to be killed. I'm going to be raised. That's not the script. And so Jesus says, okay, let me tell you what discipleship means based upon what I just told you. That I am the Christ. Your acknowledgement. I'm going to die. I'm going to be raised. And your teaching, and anything contrary to that, is the teachings of men, not the teachings of God. But now let me tell you how that's supposed to impact you. And it's interesting how many times Jesus, once he reveals more clearly his dying leads into a discipleship moment. And that our response to the death, the burial, the resurrection of Jesus Christ should be what motivates us, disciples, disciplines and disciples us. And so he goes, here is what is going to be required to be part of the kingdom when the sovereign of that kingdom is a suffering servant. I want you to take up your cross daily and follow me. Now, Mark adds the word daily. The other gospel writers don't. It says take up your cross. Mark puts it in daily, acknowledging the fact that it is a lifestyle. It's not something we do once and say, okay, that's checked off my list, Jim. I can go on to something else. It's something that we do on a routine basis. But what's the significance of Jesus saying, you take up your cross? He just told him that he's going to die. He will be taking up his cross. What's the significance of us as a disciple that Jesus tells us on a daily basis to take up our cross? What does that mean for us in the 21st century to take up our cross?
To take our cross, to me, means that we are an example of Christ, that daily, that we have when we accept Christ, that we are crucified also, that we are at the point of where we are to serve him and deny everything else, you know.
Okay.
We have died in ourselves personally.
Okay. What else?
People are gonna hate us.
Pardon?
People are going to.
People are going to hate us. Yeah, that's exactly right. Rick, I saw.
Well, you know, Jesus took the cross, took our sins to the cross. And I just, kind of like what Bob said, is, you know, if we're going to pick up our cross, we're going to take whatever is restricting us, any sins, anything that gets in our way, we're going to bear that cross and continue on with the story of Jesus.
Okay.
Whatever is slowing us down, whatever restrictions we have.
The author of Hebrews says to throw off the sin that so easily entangles and ensnares us.
That may be, but it also might mean whatever comes along of those kinds of things, but pressure from other people that might be even up to death, the point of death,
Okay.
that
Combine them.
we will endure that.
We're following his example to be like him. That we are on a daily basis putting to death the things of the flesh as what the cross signifies for us. We're willing to go to the point of, as he was the suffering servant, that we're willing to do that as well. There's one more that I came across, explanation of this that I found very, very interesting. Who benefited from Jesus taking up his cross? We did. We did. Is what Jesus telling his disciples that I want you to take up your cross? Yes, it will help us be unburdened. Yes, 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 yes. But I want you to take up your cross so that your life and subsequent submission to your individual crosses benefits other people. That the life you choose, I'm choosing you to be part of my kingdom, and kingdom dwellers will follow my example and will be willing to lay their life down on a daily basis, figuratively, literally, for the benefit of other people. Because that's why Jesus did it. Jesus didn't get a participation trophy because he went to the cross. His sacrifice did not benefit him in any way. Terry.
I'm just thinking about the dichotomy between, on the one hand, we're saved by God's grace, and on the other hand, we need to work out our own salvation with fear and trembling. And there should be this kind of passion think about Paul, he talked about the fact that he buffeted his body daily, lest after having preached to others, he said, I myself should be a castaway. This idea of taking up the cross to me implies I've got to be about my Father's business. It's true I'm saved by God's grace, and it's true I can't earn my salvation. But the flip side of it is, if I'm really driven by the love of Christ, which is what compelled Paul, then I'm going to be given it 110% all the time to be the best possible example and emulation of Jesus Christ possible. And if you think about it, you could go through lots of things, but just pick the 10th commandment, thou shalt not covet. What does that mean for me as a Christian not to covet? How passionate do I have to be about that? How much do I have to make that a part of who I am? Jesus gave up everything in heaven and on earth for me. Therefore, how should I treat my possessions?
Right. Absolutely. Jesus, in the Sermon on the Mount, one of the Beatitudes says, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. One commentator says, translated into modern language, happy and deathless are those who are addicted to righteousness. I like that. Addicted to it. It just consumes me to acquire it. Yeah.
It just makes me think of putting others first and being a servant to all.
Yep. Passionately living my life to be like Christ. On a daily basis. It's not something that's one and done. It's not when it's convenient or it's in season. It's something that I routinely do. Craig.
At this point, Jesus hasn't been crucified, obviously. He's talking about the cross, which is, this has got to sound really strange to these guys. This would be, what other form of execution had you carrying the instrument of execution out to the hillside where this was done? It would be like me saying, you got to pick up your lethal injection, carry it to the chamber where you're going to be executed. Because they're after us, and I'm going to let them get me. And I'm going to go to the firing squad or the hangman's noose, whatever, form of execution. This is a really strange thing.
Yeah.
And I think of a book I read recently called Embrace the Suck. Sometimes it really sucks to go do God's work.
Right.
And it reminds me of a conversation with Jared Brown. Jared, we've supported him for years, Mission Lazarus, Haiti, and Honduras. And I said to him once, Jared, I went down there and I helped put that roof on that school building, and I got dysentery. And I spent 2 days in the hotel with dysentery. It's better for me, just send my money. And he looked at me and smiled very kindly, and he said, Craig, I have a parasite in my stomach right now that cannot be killed by modern antibiotics or any treatments we have. It's just what you got to do. And he didn't say stop whining about it, anything like that. He was very kind when he said it to me, but that's, he's out there doing it.
Yeah.
Getting it done.
And he said to them, I tell you the truth, some who are standing here will not taste death before they see the kingdom of God come with power. After 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John with him and led them up on a high mountain where they were all alone. And there he was transfigured before them. His clothes became dazzling white, whiter than anyone in the world could bleach them. And there appeared before him Elijah and Moses. We're talking with Jesus. Peter said to him, Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. Let us put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. He did not know what to say. They were so frightened. And this is again Peter's quoting it to Mark, going, I rambled. Didn't have any idea what I was supposed to say. I was so shocked and moved by the moment. Then a cloud appeared and enveloped them, and a voice came from the cloud, this is my son whom I love. Listen to him. And suddenly when they looked around, they no longer saw anyone with them except Jesus. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus gave them orders not to tell anyone what they had seen until the Son of Man had risen from the dead. And they kept the matter to themselves, discussing what rising from the dead meant. And then they asked him, why do the teachers of the law say that Elijah must come first? And Jesus replied, to be sure, Elijah does come first and restores all things. Why then is it written that the Son of Man must suffer much and be rejected? But I tell you, Elijah has come, and they have done to him everything they wished, just as it is written about him. We call this the Mount of Transfiguration. And I find it interesting that Peter includes this, and this is one of the few times Peter gives us some specific chronology, 6 days later. We've been thinking about what it means that he's going to die. What does it mean for him to tell us to take up our cross? And figuratively, maybe even literally die. It's interesting that that's how Peter actually was killed. Was crucified on a cross. However, he was crucified upside down, historians tell us, because he did not think it right to be killed the same way that Jesus was. And so history tells us he was crucified upside down. And he says, here is some clarification for you. He takes his 3 closest and they go up, and first thing that happens is Jesus' appearance changes. And I find it interesting. It says his garments were so white that there's nobody in the world, no matter how much bleach they use, could make something as white as the garments that he was wearing. That it represented radiance and his glory. And I can just imagine what that did in the minds of these 3. To see Jesus like this. And then to add to the drama, to add to the amazement, now there's Peter and Elijah. And I find it interesting that they recognize it as Peter and Elijah. Or Moses, Peter. Yeah, Moses and Elijah. Thank you. I got Peter on the brain. Moses and Elijah. That they recognized them. And it's interesting that other accounts of the Mount of Transfiguration, it has the 3 of them, Jesus, Moses, and Elijah, talking about his ministry and his upcoming death. And Peter, as he is wont to do, just goes, tell you what, let's do. This is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. The only thing I can think of is let's honor all 3 of you. Now, some have said that this represents the law and the prophets. Elijah was not a writing prophet, so I don't know that the 2 of them represent the old covenant. But it's interesting that when Jesus says, what's the word on the street? Some people say, you're Elijah. And then the conversations are coming down the mountain. They ask once again about Elijah. And Malachi's prophecy that Elijah will come, and Jesus said he already has come, and we know that he's referring to John the Baptist. The most dramatic event, as awe-inspiring and mind-blowing as seeing Jesus in this state of glory, and then to see 2 of their Sunday school heroes, Moses and Elijah, to the point that Peter, I'm getting it right now, Peter is so excited that he wants to honor the 3 of them. Probably the most phenomenal event of that experience was a cloud coming down. And out of the cloud, they hear the voice of God Almighty. And he says something similar to what he says when Jesus is baptized. But when Jesus is baptized, he's speaking to Jesus. You are my son, in whom I am well pleased. Now he's telling Peter and James and John and me and you listen to him. This is my son. A sovereign that his revealed glory of radiance is merely just what you can perceive with your finite senses. and he will suffer and die, as it has been prophesied about him, Jesus will say. You listen to him. The cloud rises, vapor rises, and there's just Jesus alone. One of the things for me, and I realize this is because of where I'm at in my study of the book of Galatians, but for me, this is such a beautiful picture of the fact that it is Jesus plus no one, nothing else. It's not Moses and the law. It's not Elijah representing all the prophets. It's Jesus and just Jesus that is significant. The prophets, Moses, all foretold about the Messiah coming. But it's just Jesus. And I want you to hear and listen to him. And I find it interesting, back to, he tells them not to tell anybody about this, and this is the one that they listen to. They don't tell anybody about this until after his resurrection, it says. I don't know why this one and not the others, unless maybe it was God saying, you listen to him, and the first thing he says after them is, don't tell anybody, and they're going to go, okay. This one had the authority of God behind it. And so now they make their way down the mountain. And they come from this moment of, please allow me to use this word, glorious rapture, to a scene of chaos. When they came to the other disciples, they saw a large crowd gathered around them, and the teachers of the law arguing with them. As soon as all the people saw Jesus, they were overwhelmed with wonder and ran to greet him. What are you arguing with them about? He asked. A man in the crowd answered, Teacher, I brought my son, who is possessed by a spirit that has robbed him of speech, and whenever it seizes him, it throws him to the ground. He foams at the mouth, gnashes his teeth, and becomes rigid. I asked your disciples to drive out the spirit, but they could not. O unbelieving generation, Jesus replied, how long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy to me. And so they brought him, and when the spirit saw Jesus, it immediately threw the boy into a convulsion. He fell to the ground and rolled around, foaming at the mouth. And Jesus asked the boy's father, how long has he been like this? From childhood, he answered, it has often thrown him into the fire or water to kill him. But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us. If you can. Jesus said, everything is possible for him who believes. And immediately the boy's father exclaimed, I do believe, but help me overcome my unbelief. Stop there for just a second. There is something about the father's statement that pierces me, that I relate with. I believe. And yet, there is so many times and many occasions when unbelief is what characterizes me. Oh, I can believe when I see this demon being cast out of my son. I can't deny that it happened. But there are also so many other times in my life when that belief isn't there. How do we get to the point where belief is something that is more continually residing in us? How do we get to the fact where it's not just on those spectacular moments that go, oh yeah, I believe, but it becomes part of who we are. going to give you the first lesson for me. It's not something I can do on my own. The man says, I believe, you help my unbelief. Luann.
Well, there are times in our lives, all of us probably, but mine, that I decide I can handle this situation rather than saying, you're the one that can handle it.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's, I believe.
Yeah. I need you to teach me this. It's not something I can do on my own. Now, the disciples couldn't cast the demon out, and we're going to see they're going to talk to him. He says, when Jesus saw the crowd, the deaf mute spirit, he said, I command you, come out of him and never enter him again. And the spirit shrieked, convulsed him violently, and came out. The boy looked so much like a corpse that many said, he's dead. But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him to his feet. He stood up. And after Jesus had gone indoors, the disciples asked him privately, why couldn't we drive it out? And he said, this kind can come out only by prayer. And they left the place and passed through Galilee. Jesus did not want anyone to know where they were because of his teachings. The disciples said to him, the Son of Man is going to be betrayed into the hands of men. They will kill him, and after 3 days he will rise. But they did not understand what he meant and were afraid to ask him about it. So Jesus cast the demon out. The apostles, the disciples later, when he's in a more private setting, said, how come we couldn't do this? Now, you remember he had just sent them out previously and gave them the ability to cast out demons. And they came back really proud of the fact that they were able to do that. And he talked about the fact that they saw other people casting out demons in their name, and they rebuked him, and Jesus said, don't do that. No, they're for me, not against me. And he said, well, why couldn't we do it? Why couldn't they do it?
They started to believe that it was their ability to do it, not that it was coming from God.
How do we know that? I agree. This type only comes out with prayer. A recognition of the fact that we can't do it ourselves.
That's the same thing about, I believe, but help my unbelief.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting to me, in the daily Bible reading that I'm doing as I'm reading through the Bible, I am now in the text in Numbers where the children of Israel complain about not having water. God tells Moses and Aaron to speak to the rock. Moses strikes the rock, and God says, why did you not honor me and consider me to be holy? And I think the reason why he is punished by not being allowed to go to the promised land is because he says, because the words that he uses to the children of Israel is, so that we will bring you water. And they had gotten to the point where they were going, we're pretty good. Now this only comes out with prayer. But I also can't help but believe that if, in my mind, if Peter is Mark's resource material, verse 33, they came to Capernaum, and when he was in the house, he asked them, what are you arguing about on the road? But they kept quiet because of the way they had argued about who was the greatest. I wonder, and this is just the musings of the mind of Lyle, if the reason they could not drive the demon out is they were arguing over who could do it better. And who should have been the one to get the recognition for doing it. Because on the road, after this event, they're arguing amongst themselves, who's the greatest? Now, Peter, James, and John would go, it's us. You guys didn't get to go up and see what we saw. Oh, I'm not allowed to tell you about that. They're arguing over who's the greatest. Now, Jesus has twice now told them the fact that he's going to die. And I think the fact that he's going to die is finally starting to soak into their minds as much as they don't believe it fits the scenario and what they'd expected the Messiah to be. And so maybe one of the reasons why they're arguing it over, and one of the reasons why James and John's mother comes to Jesus and asks for a favor, can my two sons sit at your right hand and your left hand, They truly believe the kingdom is coming. They still have all kinds of misconceptions of what the kingdom is going to be. They do think it's going to be an earthly one. And okay, so the king is going to die and be raised. That's difficult to wrap our minds around. But if the king is going to die, who's next in command? They're jockeying for position. And so Jesus tells them. Sitting down, Jesus called the 12 and said, if anyone wants to be first, he must be the very last, the servant of all. Again, Peter's purpose to a Roman audience is to describe the sovereign God as a servant. And not just a servant, but one who will suffer because he's chosen to serve. He took a little child and had them stand among them, taking him in his arms. He said to them, whoever welcomes one of these little children in my name welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me does not welcome me, but the one who sent me. And then we see this teacher, we saw a man casting out demons in your name, and we told him to stop it. You're not one of our team. You're not wearing one of our jerseys. Jesus is trying to bring to an understanding now of time is close. I'm going to be killed. I will be raised. It's going to be the religious leaders of our time and our country and our faith that's going to do it. I just told you to take up your cross. I'm pretty sure that they were aware that the only way that Jesus was going to die, if indeed he was, is the Jews did not have the right to do it. I think they assumed it was going to be a crucifixion. And Jesus, you follow me. You do what I do. You follow my example. Take up your cross. Sacrifice yourself for others. But who's the greatest? If you're all sacrificing yourself for each other, there is no greatest.
It reminds me of Jan's dad who said, it's amazing what can be accomplished when you're not concerned about who gets the credit.
And it's amazing what can get accomplished when you're not concerned about who gets the credit. And that's where they're at right now. And they will continue to be. This is not the last time this conversation will be had amongst them, and Jesus will have to discuss it with them. And that, I am now at 10:16. I have gone 1 minute over. Gary?
Hearing and seeing.
Hearing and seeing. Oh, is that for them? To know that? Is that what you're saying?
That's next week's lesson.
Okay, next week. Hearing and seeing. Thanks, guys.
You've got a real bargain.